Maya-chan pressed her face against the cold metal bars of her cage, watching the massive ape-like creatures move around the dimly lit chamber. Their hulking forms stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in thick gray fur that seemed to absorb what little light filtered down from above. Red eyes glowed in their skull-like faces as they communicated through a series of grunts and hand gestures that made Maya's stomach turn. She had been their prisoner for 3 days now, ever since the Garathi raiders had attacked the human research station on Kepler 442b. The memory of that terrible day played over and over in her mind like a broken recording. She had been working late in the xenobiology lab when the alarm started screaming. Through the reinforced windows, she had watched in horror as their ships descended from the night sky like metallic vultures. The other researchers had tried to evacuate, but the Garathi were too fast. Maya had hidden in a storage closet, listening to the sounds of destruction and the terrified screams of her colleagues. When everything went quiet, she thought maybe she was safe. That was when the closet door was ripped open and one of the creatures grabbed her with hands that could crush a human skull like an eggshell. Now she sat in this underground prison, somewhere deep beneath the surface of an alien world she didn't recognize. The air was thick and humid, carrying strange smells that reminded her of rotting vegetation and something else she couldn't identify. Water dripped constantly from the ceiling, creating an endless rhythm that seemed to match her racing heartbeat. The cage itself was barely large enough for her to stand upright. Made from some kind of dark metal that felt warm to the touch, it had been clearly designed to hold creatures much larger than humans. Maya had tried everything to escape. She had tested every bar, searched for weak points, and even tried to pick the crude lock with her hairpin. Nothing worked. The Garathi might look primitive, but their metalwork was stronger than anything humans had developed. Around her, the chamber stretched out into shadows. She could make out other cages, most of them empty, but a few contained shapes she didn't want to look at too closely. Some moved occasionally, letting out sounds that made her want to cover her ears. Others never moved at all. The Garathi had tried to communicate with her several times. Their leader, a massive creature with scars covering half his face, would approach her cage and make sounds that might have been words in their language. When she didn't respond the way he wanted, he would growl and hit the bars with his fist, making the entire structure ring like a bell. Maya had been a xenobiologist for 6 years, specializing in alien behavioral patterns. She had studied dozens of species, but the Garathi were unlike anything in the databases. They seemed to operate on pure aggression and territorial instinct. Their technology was strange too, mixing advanced metallurgy with primitive construction methods. Their weapons looked like they had been hammered together by hand, but they cut through human armor like paper. On the second day of her captivity, she had witnessed something that made her blood run cold. The Garathi had brought in another prisoner, something that looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. The creature had been clearly intelligent, trying to communicate through a series of musical sounds. Maya had watched as they performed some kind of ritual before killing it. The way they consumed their victim afterward made her realize she wasn't just a prisoner. She was food, but something about her seemed to fascinate them. The scarred leader would stare at her for long periods, tilting his head like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Sometimes he would bring other Garathi to look at her, and they would have heated discussions in their guttural language. Maya got the impression they were arguing about what to do with her. On the third night, she had made a disturbing discovery. While exploring every inch of her cage for the 100th time, her fingers had found something carved into the metal near the floor. Scratch marks that looked almost like letters. Following them with her fingertip, she had spelled out a word that made her heart stop. Human. Someone else had been here before her. Another human had been trapped in the same cage and had managed to carve that single word before. Before what? Maya didn't want to think about it, but the scratches looked old. Whoever had made them was long gone. The realization that she might not be the first human the Garathi had captured changed everything. It meant they knew about her species. It meant this wasn't random. They had specifically targeted the research station, specifically taken her. But why? What could they possibly want with humans that they couldn't get from the dozens of other species in this part of the galaxy? As she lay on the cold floor of her cage, trying to ignore the sounds echoing through the chamber, Maya forced herself to think like a scientist instead of a victim. The Garathi were clearly intelligent, but their behavior patterns didn't match any known classification. They showed signs of advanced planning and organization, but also displayed primitive ritual behaviors. Their technology was inconsistent, ranging from crude to surprisingly sophisticated. Most puzzling was their treatment of her. If she was just food, they would have killed her already like they had the lizardbird creature. If she was a slave, they would have put her to work. Instead, they seemed to be studying her just as much as she was studying them. The scarred leader had even brought what looked like a datapad during one of his visits, though she couldn't read the symbols that appeared on its screen. Maya had always prided herself on her ability to understand alien psychology. During her research career, she had successfully predicted behavioral patterns in 17 different species. But the Garathi defied every model she tried to apply. They were like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. The sound of heavy footsteps approaching her cage made Maya sit up quickly. The scarred leader was coming again, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him walked 3 other Garathi, including one that was even larger than the others. This new creature wore what looked like ceremonial markings painted across his chest and arms. They stopped in front of her cage and began their guttural conversation. Maya noticed that the others seemed to defer to the newcomer, stepping aside when he moved closer to examine her. His red eyes studied her with an intelligence that made her skin crawl. When he spoke, his voice was deeper than the others, carrying an authority that needed no translation. The scarred leader pointed at Maya and said something that sounded almost like a question. The newcomer responded with what sounded like a command, and suddenly, all of them were looking at her with a new intensity. Maya pressed herself against the back wall of her cage, wishing she could disappear. The newcomer approached the cage door and began working with the lock. Maya's heart started racing as she realized they were about to let her out. Were they finally going to kill her? Or worse? She looked around desperately for anything she could use as a weapon, but the cage was completely empty except for herself. The door swung open with a rusty screech. The newcomer gestured for her to come out, speaking in that deep, commanding voice. When Maya didn't move, the scarred leader reached in and grabbed her arm, pulling her out of the cage with casual strength. Maya found herself standing in the middle of the 4 massive creatures, feeling like a child surrounded by giants. The newcomer circled around her slowly, examining her from every angle. He reached out with one clawed finger and touched her hair, making a sound that might have been surprise. Human hair was apparently different from anything he had encountered before. Then, something unexpected happened. The newcomer began to speak, but this time the sounds were different. It took Maya a moment to realize he was trying to speak in her language. The words were badly pronounced and barely recognizable, but she could make out what he was attempting to say. "You are human," he said slowly, each word a struggle. Maya's eyes widened in shock. "You speak English?" The newcomer's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. "Little bit. Learn from others." "Others? What others?" But instead of answering, the newcomer turned to his companions and spoke rapidly in their own language. Maya caught what sounded like excitement in their voices. They were clearly discussing her, but she couldn't understand any of it. The scarred leader left and returned a few minutes later carrying what looked like a bundle of fabric. He threw it at Maya's feet and gestured for her to pick it up. When she unfolded it, she found it was some kind of garment, roughly made but sized for a human body. "Put on," the newcomer commanded. "We go." "Go? Go where?" "You see. Come." Maya realized she had no choice. If she refused, they would probably just drag her anyway. At least if she cooperated, she might learn more about what they wanted from her. She quickly pulled the garment over her research station uniform. It was rough against her skin and smelled like the Garathi themselves, but it was warmer than what she had been wearing. The newcomer led the way out of the chamber, with Maya walking behind him and the other 3 Garathi surrounding her. They climbed up through a series of tunnels that had been carved directly into the rock. The walls were rough and uneven, clearly excavated by hand rather than machinery. Strange symbols were painted along the walls at regular intervals, probably marking directions or territory. As they walked, Maya tried to process what she had learned. The Garathi leader could speak some English, which meant they had encountered humans before. He had mentioned others, which confirmed her suspicion that she wasn't the first human they had captured. But what had happened to those others? And why was she being taken somewhere instead of simply killed like the other alien they had brought in? The tunnels seemed to go on forever, branching off in different directions like an underground city. Maya caught glimpses of other chambers through open doorways, some containing more cages, others filled with equipment she didn't recognize. The Garathi civilization was much more complex than she had initially thought. They passed groups of other Garathi who stopped to stare at Maya as she walked by. Some made sounds that could have been excitement or hostility. A few reached out as if they wanted to touch her, but the newcomer growled at them, and they pulled back. Maya got the impression that she was valuable property that wasn't to be damaged. After what felt like hours of walking, they emerged into a much larger chamber that took Maya's breath away. The ceiling stretched up so high that it disappeared into darkness above. The walls were covered in intricate carvings that seemed to tell some kind of story, though Maya couldn't make sense of the images. Torches burned in metal brackets, casting dancing shadows across the ancient artwork. But what really caught her attention was what occupied the center of the chamber. It looked like some kind of arena or ceremonial space, with raised platforms arranged in a circle around a central area. Maya's stomach dropped as she realized what this place was for. She was looking at where they brought prisoners for their final moments. The newcomer noticed her expression and made that twisted smile again. Not for you. You special. You help us. Help you? Help you do what? You learn soon. First, you meet others. Others. There was that word again. Maya's heart started beating faster as she wondered if there might be other humans here after all. Maybe she wasn't alone. Maybe together they could find a way to escape. The newcomer led her toward one of the raised platforms. As they got closer, Maya could see that there were figures sitting on it, though the shadows made it hard to make out details. When they were close enough for the torchlight to reach them, Maya gasped in shock. There were indeed other humans there. 3 of them, all wearing the same rough garments she now wore. But something was terribly wrong with them. They sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead with empty expressions. When Maya called out to them, none of them responded. They didn't even seem to notice she was there. What did you do to them? Maya demanded, turning to face the newcomer. They help us. Now are they happy? Soon you happy too. Maya looked back at the 3 humans and realized with growing horror that their eyes were completely blank. Not just empty of emotion, but literally blank. Where their pupils should have been, there was only white. Whatever the Garathi had done to them had taken away their minds completely. You're going to do that to me too, Maya said, backing away from the platform. Yes, but first you help us understand. You teach us about human ways. Then we make you like others. No more fear, no more pain, only service. The full scope of the Garathi plan was becoming clear to Maya. They weren't just capturing humans for food or slaves. They were trying to learn about human civilization, probably to attack more human settlements. And once they had learned everything they could from her, they would lobotomize her like they had done to the others. Maya's mind raced as she looked around the chamber for any possible escape route. The entrance they had come through was blocked by 2 of the Garathi. The other exits were too far away, and she would never outrun these creatures anyway. But she had to try something. She couldn't end up like those empty shells sitting on the platform. I won't help you, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I won't tell you anything about humans. The newcomer laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. You will. They all say that first. But pain changes minds. We have ways to make you want to talk. As if on cue, more Garathi began emerging from the shadows around the chamber. Maya counted at least a dozen of them, all carrying crude but effective-looking weapons. There was no way she could fight her way out, but maybe she could buy some time. If she could learn more about their plans, she might find some weakness she could exploit. If you want me to help you understand humans, Maya said, then you need to understand that we don't respond well to threats. If you want my cooperation, you'll have to earn it. The newcomer tilted his head, studying her with those glowing red eyes. Humans are weak. We take what we want. Then, you don't understand us at all. And if you don't understand us, how can you defeat us? For the first time since she had met him, the newcomer looked uncertain. Maya pressed her advantage. You've been capturing humans for information, but you're going about it all wrong. You turn them into vegetables before you learn anything useful. I'm a scientist. I study alien behavior for a living. I could teach you things about humans that those others never could. But only if you treat me as something more than just another animal in a cage. The Garathi around the chamber began muttering among themselves. Maya could tell her words were having some effect, though she wasn't sure if it was positive or negative. The newcomer held up a hand for silence and spoke to her again. What do you offer? Maya took a deep breath, knowing her next words would determine whether she lived or died. I offer you real knowledge about human psychology, human technology, human weaknesses. But I want something in return. You are a prisoner. You demand nothing. I'm not demanding. I'm negotiating. If you kill me or turn me into one of those empty shells, you get nothing. If you work with me, you get information that could help you conquer every human world in the galaxy. The chamber fell silent except for the crackling of the torches. Maya could feel the weight of dozens of alien eyes studying her, trying to decide if she was valuable enough to keep alive. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she waited for their decision. Finally, the newcomer spoke. You have 3 days. You show us useful things about humans, or you join others on platform. If you try to escape, you die slowly. If you lie to us, you die slowly. If you disappoint us, you die slowly. You understand? Understand. Good. Korath will watch you. He speak your language a little bit too. You try anything, he kill you. The scarred leader, apparently named Korath, stepped forward and grabbed Maya's arm. His grip was firm, but not painful. Yet, as she was led away from the chamber of horrors, Maya's mind was already working on her next move. She had bought herself 3 days, but she would need more than that to find a way out of this nightmare. The Garathi wanted to learn about humans, and she was going to teach them. But not in the way they expected. She was going to teach them that humans were far more dangerous than they realized. And if she played her cards right, that lesson might be the last thing they ever learned. Maya spent her first night of freedom from the cage in a small chamber that served as her new prison. The room was carved from the same dark stone as the rest of the underground complex, with a single torch providing flickering light. A pile of rough blankets in one corner served as a bed, and a crude basin held water that tasted of minerals but was clean enough to drink. Korath had stationed himself outside her door, his massive form blocking any hope of escape. Through the gaps in the stone barrier that served as her door, she could see his red eyes glowing in the darkness. The scarred Garathi never seemed to sleep, simply sitting in the corridor like a living statue. But Maya wasn't planning to escape. Not yet. She had work to do first. The next morning, she was brought before the newcomer again. In the better light of the main chamber, she could see that his ceremonial markings were actually scars, deliberately cut into his flesh in intricate patterns. He introduced himself as Thrakvor, which apparently meant something like mind seeker in their language. Today you begin teaching, Thrakvor announced. Show us human weakness. Maya had spent the entire night thinking about this moment. First, I need to understand what you already know. You said you learned English from others. Show me. Thrakvor gestured to Korath, who disappeared into the shadows and returned with what looked like a data storage device. The technology was clearly not Garathi in origin. Its smooth surfaces and precise construction, marking it as something taken from one of their victims. We take this from human ship. Many words inside. We learned some. Maya recognized the device as a standard research station data core. If the Garathi had been learning English from stolen databases, they probably had a very limited and technical understanding of human language. They would know the words, but not the context, the grammar, but not the meaning behind it. May I see it? Thrakvor handed her the device. Maya activated it and scrolled through the files, her heart sinking as she recognized some of them. These are from the Kepler 442b research station where she had worked. The Garathi had been studying human communication for much longer than she had realized. But as she examined their translation attempts, Maya began to see opportunities. The Garathi had focused entirely on technical and scientific documents. They had learned how humans describe things, but they had no understanding of human emotion, psychology, or social structure. "This is good basic information," Maya said, handing the device back. "But it's like learning to read without understanding what the words mean. You know how to say human words, but you don't understand how humans think. Then teach us how humans think." Maya smiled, though there was nothing friendly about the expression. Human thinking is very different from Garathi thinking. We're not driven by simple aggression or territory like most species. We're driven by something much more dangerous. What is this thing? Curiosity. The desire to understand everything around us. That's what makes humans truly dangerous. We never stop learning, never stop adapting, never stop finding new ways to solve problems. Thrakvor leaned forward, clearly interested. "This curiosity, how does it make you strong? Let me show you. In your data core, you have information about human ships, correct?" Thrakvor nodded and had Korath pull up the relevant files. Maya studied them for a moment, recognizing the technical specifications for several human vessel designs. These ships were designed 200 years ago. The basic design hasn't changed much because it works well. But if you look at the internal systems, Maya pointed to specific components on the display. Every single one has been upgraded dozens of times. Humans never stop improving things, even when they work perfectly. Why change what works? Because humans always ask, what if? What if we could make it faster? What if we could make it stronger? What if we could make it do something completely different? That's how humans think. Maya could see that Thrakvor was beginning to understand. The Garathi were clearly an ancient species, probably using the same basic technologies for thousands of years. The idea of constantly changing and improving everything would be alien to them. This is why you can't understand humans by studying our technology or our language, Maya continued. You have to understand our psychology. And human psychology is built around the idea that everything can be improved. Over the next several hours, Maya began her carefully planned education program. She taught the Garathi about human social structures, explaining how humans organize themselves into complex hierarchies based on knowledge and ability rather than simple physical strength. She described human emotions and how they drove human behavior in ways that pure logic could never explain. But most importantly, she began teaching them about human adaptability. She explained how humans had spread across dozens of worlds, adapting to environments that would kill most other species. She described how human culture changed constantly, incorporating new ideas and technologies at a pace that left other species struggling to keep up. "Humans are like water," she told Thrakvor during one of their sessions. "We flow around obstacles, find weaknesses in any defense, and eventually we're down anything that tries to contain us." The Garathi leader was fascinated by these concepts, but Maya could see that he didn't truly understand the implications. To him, this was just interesting information about a species he planned to conquer. He had no idea that Maya was giving him a warning. By the second day, Maya had established herself as a valuable resource. Other Garathi had begun attending her teaching sessions, listening as she explained human behavior patterns and motivations. She was careful to give them real information, knowing that any lies would be discovered and would likely result in her death. But She was also careful about what information she shared. When Thrakvor asked about human military tactics, she focused on historical examples that were centuries out of date. When he wanted to know about human technology, she explained principles that were already widely known among galactic civilizations. The key was to give them enough useful information to keep them interested, while avoiding anything that could actually help them attack human settlements. On the evening of the second day, Maya made a request that surprised the Garathi leadership. "I want to see the humans you've captured before me, the ones on the platform." Thrakvor studied her with those glowing red eyes. "Why? If you want me to help you understand humans, I need to understand what you've already learned. What did they tell you before you changed them?" "They told us nothing useful. Only screaming and begging." "That's because you approached them wrong. Let me talk to them. I might be able to learn something you missed." After some discussion among the Garathi leadership, Thrakvor agreed. Maya was taken back to the ceremonial chamber where the three blank-eyed humans sat on their platform. Up close, she could see that they were all adults, probably researchers or explorers like herself. "Can you understand me?" Maya asked the nearest one, a woman with graying hair who might have been a scientist. The woman turned her head toward Maya's voice, but her blank white eyes showed no recognition. When she opened her mouth to speak, only meaningless syllables came out. Maya felt sick as she realized the full extent of what the Garathi had done to them. Whatever process they used didn't just remove memories or emotions. It seemed to have destroyed the higher brain functions entirely, leaving only basic motor responses. "How do you do this to them?" Maya asked Thrakvor. "Ancient ritual. We take away fear and pain and anger. Leave only obedience." "Show me." Thrakvor led her to a side chamber where Maya discovered the source of her nightmares. The room contained what looked like an altar made from the same dark stone as the walls. Strange symbols were carved around its edges, and metal restraints were built into its surface. But what made Maya's blood run cold was the array of sharp instruments arranged on a nearby table. "We open the skull here," Thrakvor explained, pointing to one of the tools. "Remove parts of brain that cause trouble." Very precise work. Maya forced herself to stay calm as she studied the crude surgical setup. The Garathi had somehow learned to perform lobotomies, but their methods were primitive and brutal. It was amazing that their victims survived it all. "This is wasteful," Maya said finally. "How wasteful? You're destroying the most valuable part of the human brain, the parts that make us creative and adaptable. You're turning your prisoners into vegetables when you could be gaining allies. Humans cannot be trusted as allies. Not the way you're approaching them. But what if there was a better way?" Thrakvor's interest was clearly piqued. "What better way?" Maya took a deep breath, knowing she was about to make the most important gamble of her life. What if instead of destroying human minds, you could reprogram them? Make them want to serve you willingly. This is possible. With the right techniques, yes. Human psychology is complex, but it's also predictable. If you understand how our minds work, you can influence them without destroying them. Maya began explaining basic concepts of psychological manipulation, drawing on her knowledge of xenopsychology and behavioral conditioning. She described how human beliefs could be gradually changed through repeated exposure to new ideas, how emotional associations could be formed and redirected, how social pressure could reshape individual behavior. The Garathi leadership was fascinated by these concepts. To them, it was like learning a new form of technology, a way to control other species without breaking them. "Show us how this works," Thrakvor demanded. "I'll need test subjects. And not humans, you don't have any to spare. But you must have other prisoners." The next day, Maya found herself in another part of the underground complex, standing before a cage that contained a creature she had never seen before. It looked like a cross between an insect and a mammal with 6 legs and fur-covered carapace. Its large, intelligent eyes tracked her movement as she approached. "This one taken from Trading Post," Korath explained. "Very aggressive. Tries to escape many times." Maya studied the creature's behavior patterns, noting signs of intelligence and curiosity. It reminded her of some of the more advanced species she had studied during her career. What do you normally do with prisoners like this? Usually kill and eat. Sometimes keep for work if strong enough. Let me try something different. Over the next several hours, Maya demonstrated basic behavioral conditioning techniques. She used food rewards to encourage the alien creature to respond to simple commands, gradually building trust through consistent positive reinforcement. By evening, the creature was actually approaching the bars of its cage when she called to it. The Garathi were amazed by the transformation. They had never seen a prisoner become cooperative without being broken first. You see, Maya explained, instead of destroying its mind, I changed its behavior. Now it wants to cooperate because it associates me with positive experiences. This is much more useful than making it into a mindless shell. This works on humans too, even better on humans. We're social creatures, designed to form bonds and follow leaders. With the right approach, you could have human allies who serve you eagerly instead of slaves who only obey because they have no choice. Thrakvor was clearly intrigued by the possibilities. Show us how to do this with humans. I can't demonstrate on the ones you've already damaged. Their brains are too destroyed. But if you capture more humans in the future, I could teach you the proper techniques. We will capture more soon. Many more. The casual way Thrakvor said this made Maya's stomach clench. The Garathi weren't just planning random raids. They had specific targets in mind. Where? She asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Human colony on Rigel Prime. Rich place. Many people to capture. Maya knew Rigel Prime. It was a major human settlement with over 2 million inhabitants. If the Garathi attacked there with the knowledge she was giving them, it would be a massacre. That's an ambitious target, Maya said carefully. The defenses there are quite advanced. We know, but now we understand humans better. Your teaching helps us plan proper attack. Maya realized with growing horror that she had been playing directly into their hands. Every piece of information she shared about human psychology was being used to plan more effective attacks on human settlements. Her attempt to buy time and find weakness had instead made the Garathi more dangerous than ever. That night, alone in her stone chamber, Maya finally allowed herself to face the full scope of her situation. She had tried to be clever, to outmaneuver her captors through superior intellect and psychological manipulation. But she had underestimated the Garathi completely. They weren't primitive savages driven by simple aggression. They were intelligent predators who had been studying their prey for years. They had captured her not just for information, but because they needed a human expert to help them understand their enemy. And she had given them exactly what they wanted. The knowledge that millions of innocent people would die because of her cooperation was almost too much to bear. Maya had spent her career studying alien civilizations in the hope of promoting peaceful contact between species. Now her expertise was being used to plan the destruction of her own people. But as she sat in the darkness, listening to the distant sounds of the Garathi complex, Maya began to formulate a new plan. She had made a terrible mistake by trying to manipulate her captors, but that didn't mean all hope was lost. The Garathi thought they understood humans now, but they were wrong. They had learned about human psychology from a xenobiologist's perspective, focusing on the analytical and scientific aspects of human behavior. They had no understanding of the deeper currents that really drove human actions. They didn't understand human courage. They didn't understand human sacrifice. And most importantly, they didn't understand human revenge. Maya had spent 3 days teaching them about human adaptability and problem solving. Tomorrow, she was going to give them a practical demonstration of just how dangerous those traits could be. As she drifted off to sleep on her pile of rough blankets, Maya whispered a promise to herself and to the millions of people on Rigel Prime who were counting on her without even knowing it. The Garathi wanted to learn about human behavior. She was going to teach them something they would never forget. Maya woke before dawn on her 3rd day, her mind sharp and focused despite the rough sleeping conditions. She had spent hours during the night planning her next moves, and now it was time to put her desperate scheme into action. When Korath came to escort her to the morning session with Thrakvor, Maya was ready with a new request. I need to see your weapons manufacturing, she announced as soon as she was brought before the Garathi leader. Thrakvor's scarred face showed surprise. What? You're planning to attack Rigel Prime? But you're thinking about it wrong. Human psychology is only part of the equation. If you really want to defeat humans, you need to understand how we approach warfare. And to do that, I need to see how you make your weapons. The request clearly intrigued Thrakvor. After a brief discussion with his advisors, he agreed to take Maya on a tour of the Garathi weapons workshops. The underground complex was even larger than Maya had realized. They walked for nearly an hour through tunnels and chambers, passing hundreds of Garathi engaged in various activities. Some were working metal with primitive but effective forges. Others were assembling electronic components with surprising skill. How many of you are there? Maya asked as they walked. This clan, maybe 5,000. All clans together, maybe 50,000. Maya tried to hide her shock at the numbers. 50,000 Garathi warriors would be enough to overwhelm most human colonies if they attacked all at once. But as she watched them work, she began to notice patterns that gave her hope. The Garathi were excellent individual craftsmen, but they seemed to have no concept of mass production or standardization. Each weapon was made individually, with slight variations in design and construction. Their organization was also more primitive than she had expected, with small groups working independently rather than as part of a coordinated whole. Your metalwork is impressive, Maya said as they watched a group of Garathi forging blade weapons. But inefficient. How inefficient? You're making each weapon by hand. It takes skill, but it's slow. Humans learned long ago to make weapons in large quantities using machines. We can produce 100 weapons in the time it takes you to make one. Thrakvor looked thoughtful. Show us this machine production. I can't show you the machines themselves, but I can explain the principles. Maya spent the next several hours describing industrial manufacturing processes, explaining how humans used automated systems to produce large quantities of identical items. She described assembly lines, quality control systems, and the economic principles that made mass production possible. But as she spoke, Maya was carefully studying the Garathi workshop setup. She was looking for something specific, and after several hours of observation, she found it. Hidden among the more conventional metalworking equipment was something that didn't belong. It was a small device, clearly of human origin, that looked like it had been scavenged from a destroyed ship. Maya recognized it as a plasma containment unit, probably torn from a human vessel's power system. Where did you get that device? Maya asked, pointing at the unit. Salvage from human ship. We try to understand how it works, but it is broken. Maya moved closer to examine the device. It wasn't broken at all, just deactivated. The Garathi had no idea what they had found. This is very dangerous technology, Maya said. Human plasma systems can explode with tremendous force if they're not handled properly. Can you fix it? Maya pretended to study the device more carefully. Maybe, but it would be extremely dangerous to work on here. If something went wrong, it could destroy this entire workshop. Then, we move it somewhere safe. There's another problem. Even if I could repair it, you don't have the support systems needed to use it safely. This device requires specific cooling systems, electromagnetic containment fields, and quantum stabilizers. Without those, it's basically a bomb waiting to go off. Thrakvor looked disappointed, but not surprised. Human technology, too complex. Not necessarily. The principles are actually quite simple once you understand them. Let me explain how plasma containment works. Maya launched into a detailed technical explanation, describing the physics behind plasma generation and magnetic bottle containment. She made it sound incredibly complex and dangerous, emphasizing all the things that could go wrong if the systems weren't properly calibrated. What she didn't mention was that the device in front of them was actually a self-contained unit that could be safely activated by anyone who knew the proper startup sequence. As the day progressed, Maya continued her education program with renewed urgency. She taught the Garathi about human logistics, explaining how human armies were supplied and coordinated. She described human communication systems and command structures. But throughout all of this, she was carefully planning ideas. Human military doctrine emphasizes speed and surprise, she explained during one session. We prefer to strike quickly and decisively rather than engage in prolonged battles. This is why you are weak, one of the Garathi advisors commented. You fear real fighting. You misunderstand. Humans avoid prolonged battles because we've learned they're wasteful. Why fight for months when you can win in minutes? But this also means that humans are very vulnerable to certain types of attacks. Thrakvor leaned forward with interest. What types? Attacks that force us to respond quickly without time to plan properly. If you can create a situation where humans have to act immediately, they often make mistakes. Maya was building towards something, creating a framework that would make her eventual suggestion seem logical and reasonable. For example, she continued, if you attacked a human colony and then retreated to a fortified position, human forces would probably pursue you immediately rather than waiting to gather proper intelligence. They would be so angry about the attack that they would want immediate revenge. This could be useful, Thrakvor mused. Very useful, if you knew how to prepare the right kind of trap. That evening, Maya made another request. She wanted to see the Garathi communication systems, claiming that she needed to understand how they coordinated their attacks. The communication center was located deep in the heart of the complex, in a chamber filled with equipment that looked like a mixture of advanced technology and primitive construction. Maya recognized some of the components as being of human origin, probably salvaged from captured ships. You have faster-than-light communications? She asked, examining one of the more sophisticated devices. Yes, we take this from human colony ship. Very useful for coordinating clans. Maya studied the equipment more carefully. It was indeed a human FTL communication array, but it had been modified in ways that made her heart race with possibility. The Garathi had connected the human equipment to their own systems, creating a hybrid network that could reach across interstellar distances. But their modifications were crude and potentially unstable. This is impressive, Maya said, but dangerous. Human FTL communication systems use quantum entanglement principles that can be disrupted by electromagnetic interference. If the wrong kind of signal went through this network, it could cause feedback loops that would burn out the entire system. What kind of signal? Specific frequencies that create resonance patterns in the quantum field. It's extremely technical, but basically certain types of transmissions can destroy FTL communication equipment. Maya was lying, but she was lying carefully. The principles she was describing were real enough to sound convincing, even though the specific threat she was describing didn't actually exist. Can you fix this problem? Thrakvor asked. I can show you how to modify the system to avoid the dangerous frequencies. But it would require some changes to your broadcasting equipment. Over the next several hours, Maya worked with the Garathi technicians to improve their communication system. In reality, she was introducing subtle modifications that would serve her purposes later. As night fell on her third day, Maya was taken back to her chamber for what Thrakvor had announced would be her final night. Tomorrow, she would undergo the ritual that would turn her into another blank-eyed shell like the others. But Maya wasn't planning to be here tomorrow. She waited until the sounds of the complex quieted down, indicating that most of the Garathi had gone to sleep. Then, she began implementing the plan she had been building all day. The first step was getting out her chamber. The stone barrier that served as her door was heavy, but not locked, held in place only by its weight. Maya had noticed during her tours that Garathi architecture relied on mass rather than sophisticated locking mechanisms. Using techniques she had learned during survival training, Maya wedged her blankets under one edge of the barrier and used her body weight as a lever. It took nearly an hour of careful work, but eventually she managed to create a gap just large enough to squeeze through. Korath was asleep in the corridor outside, his massive form sprawled across the floor. Maya held her breath as she carefully stepped over him, knowing that if he woke up, her escape would be over before it began. The tunnels of the Garathi complex were dimly lit by occasional torches, creating pools of light separated by stretches of darkness. Maya used the shadows to navigate back toward the communications center, remembering the route from her earlier tour. She encountered several Garathi during her journey, but they were all occupied with their own business and paid no attention to another figure moving through the tunnels. Maya's human clothing probably helped her blend in, as did her familiarity with the complex layout. The communications center was guarded by two Garathi, but they were both asleep at their posts. Maya waited in the shadows for several minutes to make sure they weren't just resting their eyes, then crept past them into the equipment chamber. The modifications she had made earlier were still in place. Maya activated the FTL communication array and began broadcasting a carefully crafted message. The message was in human standard code, transmitted on emergency frequencies that any human vessel or settlement would be monitoring. But it wasn't a call for help. Instead, it was a detailed intelligence report about Garathi capabilities, weaknesses, and planned attacks. Maya transmitted everything she had learned during her 3 days of captivity. The location of the Garathi complex, their numbers, their technology, their planned attack on Rigel Prime. She described their psychological blind spots, their primitive manufacturing methods, and their overconfidence in their new understanding of human behavior. But most importantly, she transmitted the exact frequencies and protocols needed to disrupt their communication network. The transmission took nearly 20 minutes to complete. Maya had to pause several times when she heard sounds in the corridor outside, but the guards never woke up. When she finished, Maya made one final modification to the Garathi equipment. Using the techniques she had demonstrated earlier, she programmed the system to broadcast a specific signal that would create exactly the kind of resonance cascade she had warned Thrakvor about. The signal wouldn't just destroy the communication array. It would send a feedback pulse through every piece of connected equipment in the complex, overloading power systems and creating electromagnetic interference that would disable most of their technology. Maya set the timer for 1 hour, giving her enough time to reach the surface before the fireworks began. Getting out of the complex proved to be easier than she had expected. The Garathi had built their tunnels for their own massive frames, leaving plenty of room for a human to move unseen. Maya followed air currents toward what she hoped was an exit, climbing steadily upward through the stone passages. After 40 minutes of climbing, Maya finally saw natural light filtering down from above. She emerged from a camouflage cave entrance into the pre-dawn darkness of an alien world. The landscape around her was harsh and rocky, with strange twisted trees and an atmosphere that tasted of sulfur and ozone. In the distance, she could see lights that might have been the Garathi settlement or might have been natural phenomena. Maya didn't care. She was free, and she had given humanity the intelligence it needed to survive the Garathi threat. Behind her, deep underground, timer circuits counted down toward zero. The Garathi were about to learn a lesson about human ingenuity that they would never forget, assuming any of them survived to remember it. Maya began walking away from the cave entrance, putting as much distance as possible between herself and what was about to become ground zero. She had no idea where she was going or how she would survive on this hostile alien world, but that didn't matter. She had done what she came to do. The rest was up to her fellow humans. The explosion, when it came, lit up the entire horizon behind her. The blast wave hit Maya, even though she was nearly 2 kilometers from the cave entrance. The ground shook beneath her feet, and the sound was like thunder trapped underground, rolling through the rock in waves that she could feel in her bones. Behind her, the twisted trees bent and swayed as if caught in a hurricane, and strange lights danced across the alien sky. Maya allowed herself one look back at the destruction she had caused. Where the Garathi complex had been, there was now a crater glowing with residual energy. Secondary explosions continued to ripple outward as underground chambers collapsed and stored equipment overloaded. The electromagnetic pulse she had triggered was still cascading through their systems, turning their technology against them. But there was no time to appreciate her handiwork. Maya was alone on a hostile alien world with no supplies, no shelter, and no idea where to find help. The Garathi who had survived the explosion would be looking for her soon, and they would not be in a forgiving mood. She forced herself to start walking again, heading away from the destruction toward what looked like higher ground. If there were any human settlements or ships in this system, they would more likely be found away from the Garathi territory. The alien landscape was even stranger in daylight. 3 different suns hung in the sky, casting overlapping shadows that confused her depth perception. The twisted trees bore fruit that glowed with bioluminescent patterns, and creatures that looked like flying jellyfish drifted through the thick atmosphere. Maya's xenobiology training told her to be extremely careful about what she touched or breathed. Alien ecosystems could be deadly to humans in ways that weren't immediately obvious. The air seemed breathable, but that didn't mean it was safe for extended exposure. After several hours of walking, Maya found what looked like a stream of clear water flowing down from the hills. She approached it cautiously, testing the liquid with her fingers before deciding it was probably safe to drink. The water tasted metallic but clean, and she was already becoming dehydrated in the alien environment. As she knelt by the stream, Maya heard sounds that made her freeze in terror. Voices in the distance, speaking the guttural language of the Garathi. They had survived her sabotage, and they were hunting for her. Maya quickly moved away from the stream and found cover among a cluster of the twisted trees. Through gaps in their strange foliage, she could see 3 Garathi warriors moving along her trail. They moved with purpose, following her footprints in the soft ground near the water. One of them was Korath, his scarred face twisted with rage. The other 2 she didn't recognize, but they carried weapons that looked functional despite the electromagnetic pulse. Maya realized that some of the Garathi must have been away from the complex when her sabotage took effect. The search party passed within 50 meters of her hiding place, their red eyes scanning the landscape for any sign of movement. Maya held her breath and stayed perfectly still until their voices faded into the distance. But she knew they would be back. The Garathi were excellent hunters, and this was their home territory. She needed to find better shelter and a way to contact human forces before they caught up with her. Maya continued climbing into the hills, looking for caves or rocky overhangs that might provide better hiding places. The landscape gradually changed from twisted forest to bare stone, with deep crevasses and strange mineral formations that suggested volcanic activity. As evening approached, bringing darkness under the alien stars, Maya found what she was looking for. A narrow canyon cut deep into the hillside, with caves carved into its walls by wind and weather. She picked one that was high enough to give her a good view of the surrounding area, but small enough that she could defend the entrance if necessary. The cave was cold and damp, but it was shelter. Maya gathered some of the glowing fruit from nearby trees, testing small amounts to make sure they weren't poisonous. They tasted terrible, but seemed to provide nutrition, and the bioluminescence gave her a small amount of light. As she settled in for her first night alone on the alien world, Maya tried to evaluate her situation objectively. She had successfully sabotaged the Garathi complex and transmitted vital intelligence to human forces. But she was still trapped on a hostile planet with limited resources and active pursuers. Her message would eventually reach human authorities, but it could take days or weeks for them to organize a response. Even then, they might not know where to look for her. The Garathi homeworld wasn't exactly marked on any human star charts. Maya needed to find a way to signal her location to any human ships that might come looking. But that meant venturing out of her hiding place and risking capture by the Garathi search parties. The next morning brought new challenges. Maya woke to the sound of aircraft passing overhead. Looking up through the cave entrance, she could see Garathi flying vehicles circling the area in search patterns. Her trail was getting hot, and it was only a matter of time before they found her canyon. She spent the day moving deeper into the cave system, following natural passages that led further underground. The caves seemed to form an extensive network, probably created by water flow over geological time. Maya hoped she could use them to travel without being detected from the air. But navigating the caves was dangerous work. Many passages led to dead ends or dropped off into pits that might go down for hundreds of meters. Others were flooded with water that might be toxic or might simply be too cold for human survival. Maya's scientific training helped her make smart choices about which passages to follow. She looked for air currents that indicated connections to the surface, and she tested water sources carefully before drinking from them. But she was constantly aware that she was just one mistake away from becoming lost underground forever. On her second day in the caves, Maya made a discovery that changed everything. Deep in the underground network, she found evidence of previous human presence. It was just a small mark scratched into the stone wall, but Maya recognized it immediately. The symbol was from human stellar navigation codes, marking direction and distance to specific coordinates. Someone else had been here before, and they had left a message. Following the navigation markers, Maya found more human artifacts scattered through the cave system. A discarded water container, pieces of a torn uniform, and finally, in a wider chamber deep underground, she found something that made her heart race with hope. It was a human emergency beacon, the kind carried by exploration teams and military units. The device was damaged but still functional, its status lights blinking weakly in the darkness of the cave. Maya carefully examined the beacon, trying to determine how much power it had left and whether it could still transmit. The unit was old, probably abandoned here months or even years ago by whatever human had left the navigation markers. But the quantum battery still showed a partial charge. More importantly, the beacon was already programmed with the correct frequencies and encryption codes for human emergency networks. If Maya could get it to the surface and activate it, any human ships in the system would immediately know her location. But getting to the surface meant exposing herself to the Garathi search parties that were still hunting her. Maya would have to time her move carefully, waiting for an opportunity when the patrols were elsewhere. She spent another day in the caves, moving the beacon closer to potential exit points and studying the patterns of Garathi aerial activity. The search teams seemed to follow regular schedules, with gaps in coverage that might allow her to reach the surface undetected. On the fourth day since her escape, Maya made her move. She had identified a cave opening on a high ridge that would give her a good transmission angle to any ships in orbit. The nearest Garathi patrol wasn't due to pass that area for several hours, giving her a narrow window of opportunity. Maya climbed to the surface carrying the human beacon, emerging into the strange triple sunlight of the alien world. The ridge gave her an excellent view of the surrounding landscape, but it also made her visible to anyone looking in her direction. She activated the beacon and began transmitting her emergency signal, broadcasting her identity, location, and a condensed version of her intelligence about the Garathi threat. The transmission was powerful enough to reach orbit, but it was also detectable by anyone with the right equipment. After 10 minutes of continuous broadcasting, Maya heard the sound she had been dreading. Garathi aircraft approaching from multiple directions, converging on her position. Her transmission had been detected, and they were coming for her. Maya grabbed the beacon and ran back toward the cave entrance, but she could already see that she wouldn't make it in time. The Garathi flyers were too fast, and they would reach her position long before she could get underground. Instead, she changed direction and headed for a rocky outcropping that would give her some cover. If she was going to be captured, she would at least make them work for it. The first Garathi flyer landed 50 meters away, and armed warriors emerged to surround her position. Maya recognized Korath among them, his scarred face showing satisfaction at finally cornering his prey. "Human, come out, or we burn you out," Korath called in his broken English. Maya looked down at the beacon in her hands. She had been transmitting for 10 minutes, long enough for her signal to reach any human ships in the system. If help was coming, it would come soon. She just had to survive long enough to see it. I'm not going anywhere, Maya shouted back. If you want me, come and get me. The Garathi began moving in, using their superior numbers and firepower to gradually close the circle around her position. Maya used the rocky terrain to stay mobile, making them work for every meter of ground. But she was only delaying the inevitable. The Garathi were better equipped and more familiar with the local environment. Eventually, they would corner her, and then she would face the same fate as the humans she had seen on the platform in their underground chamber. That was when Maya heard a sound that made her heart leap with hope. The distinctive whine of human plasma engines, approaching fast from orbit. Looking up through the alien atmosphere, she could see shapes descending from space. Human military dropships, painted with the colors of the Colonial Defense Force. Her message had been received, and the cavalry was coming. The Garathi had heard the ships too, and their advance on Maya's position slowed as they looked up at the approaching threat. But Korath was not about to let his prize escape again. He charged directly toward Maya's hiding place, roaring commands in his own language. Maya braced herself for a final confrontation, clutching a sharp piece of rock as her only weapon. But before Korath could reach her, the lead human dropship opened fire. Plasma bolts rained down from above, turning the rocky ground into molten slag. The Garathi scattered, seeking cover from the devastating fire from space. Several of them didn't make it, caught in the open when the human weapons found their targets. The dropship settled onto a flat area near Maya's position, its engines still glowing with heat. Armed soldiers in powered armor emerged from the cargo bay, spreading out to secure the landing zone. Dr. Maya, one of them called, his voice amplified by armor speakers. Colonial Defense Force Rescue Team. Are you injured? Maya stumbled out from behind her rocky cover, hardly believing that her nightmare was finally over. I'm okay, but there are more Garathi in the area. We know. Your intelligence transmission was received by Fleet Command 6 hours ago. We've got 3 full battle groups incoming to deal with the Garathi threat. As Maya was helped aboard the rescue ship, she looked back at the alien landscape where she had spent the worst days of her life. The Garathi were already retreating, probably realizing that their surprise advantage had been lost. But Maya knew this was just the beginning. Her intelligence about Garathi capabilities and plans would allow human forces to prepare proper defenses. The attack on Rigel Prime would never happen, and other human colonies would be warned about the threat. The Garathi had wanted to learn about human behavior. They had learned that humans were adaptable, resourceful, and absolutely ruthless when protecting their own people. It was a lesson they would never get a chance to use. 3 months after her rescue, Maya stood on the observation deck of the CDF battleship Defiance, watching the final assault on the Garathi homeworld unfold in the space before her. The alien planet hung in the view screen like a brown and gray marble, its surface scarred by human orbital bombardment. The rescue mission that had saved her life had grown into something much larger. Maya's intelligence about Garathi capabilities, weaknesses, and planned attacks had triggered the largest human military operation in decades. 3 full battle fleets had been assembled to eliminate the Garathi threat permanently. Dr. Chun, Admiral Reyes would like to speak with you on the bridge, announced a young communications officer. Maya nodded and made her way through the ship's corridors toward the command center. Over the past 3 months, she had become an unofficial advisor to the military command, helping them understand Garathi psychology and predict their tactical responses. The Bridge of a Defiance was a marvel of human military technology, filled with holographic displays and quantum computing systems that could process battlefield information faster than any alien mind could comprehend. Admiral Reyes stood at the center of it all, a tall woman whose gray hair and steady eyes spoke of decades of military experience. Doctor, we're ready to begin the final phase of the operation, Admiral Reyes said as Maya approached. Your assessment of Garathi underground facilities was correct. Our deep penetration missiles have located 7 major complexes similar to the one where you were held. Are you planning to destroy them all? Maya asked. That was the original plan. But Fleet Command wants to know if there's any intelligence value in capturing some of the facilities intact. Your experience suggests the Garathi may have been studying other species as well. Maya studied the tactical displays showing Garathi underground positions. The sight of those tunnel networks brought back memories she was still trying to process, but she forced herself to think objectively. The Garathi are pack hunters, she said finally. They gather intelligence on multiple species before choosing their targets. If we can capture their data storage facilities, we might learn about threats to other civilizations as well. Then, we'll modify the assault plan. Selective strikes only, with ground forces to secure the data centers. Maya watched as new orders went out to the fleet commanders. Human ships moved into position for precision attacks, their weapons designed to neutralize defenses without destroying everything underground. Doctor, there's something else, Admiral Reyes said quietly. The other humans we found in the Garathi facilities, the medical teams say there's no way to reverse what was done to them. The brain damage is too extensive. Maya had been dreading this conversation. The 3 humans she had seen on the platform were among dozens who had been found in Garathi complexes across their territory. All of them had been subjected to the same crude lobotomy procedure that destroyed higher brain functions. I know, Maya said. I examined them myself during my captivity. The Garathi don't understand neurology well enough to perform reversible procedures. The families are asking questions. They want to know why you escaped when their loved ones didn't. Maya felt the familiar weight of survivors' guilt pressing down on her. She had asked herself the same question hundreds of times over the past 3 months. Luck, she said, and timing. The Garathi needed someone to teach them about human psychology, and I happened to have the right background. If they had captured a different scientist, or if they had taken me earlier when they were less interested in intelligence gathering, I would have ended up the same way. Admiral Reyes nodded sympathetically. I've read your full debriefing reports. What you accomplished was remarkable. The intelligence you provided has saved millions of lives. At the cost of becoming a collaborator, I taught them things about humans that they use to plan attacks. You also taught them to underestimate human capabilities. The Garathi attacked our colonies thinking they understood us, but they had no idea what they were really facing. The conversation was interrupted by urgent reports from the fleet tactical officers. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy readings from the planet's surface. The Garathi are activating some kind of defense system. On the main display, streams of energy began rising from multiple points on the planet's surface. The beams reached into space with devastating power, targeting human ships with precision that should have been impossible given Garathi technology levels. Evasive maneuvers, Admiral Reyes commanded. All ships scatter and regroup at safe distance. Maya watched in horror as the alien energy weapons tracked human vessels across space. Several destroyers took direct hits, their shields overloading under the unexpected assault. The human fleet was forced to retreat beyond the range of the planetary defenses. How is this possible? Admiral Reyes demanded. Our intelligence indicated the Garathi had no orbital defense capabilities. Maya studied the energy patterns on the tactical display, her scientific training allowing her to recognize details that the military officers missed. Those aren't Garathi weapons, she said. The energy signatures are all wrong. This is technology from multiple different species. Meaning what? The Garathi have been collecting military technology from all the civilizations they've attacked. They're not just studying other species for intelligence. They're taking their weapons and incorporating them into their own defenses. The implications were staggering. If the Garathi had been raiding dozens of different civilizations over the years, their defensive capabilities could include technologies that humans had never encountered before. Can we counter it? Admiral Reyes asked. Maya thought about everything she had learned during her captivity. Maybe. The Garathi understand how to use alien technology, but they don't really understand how it works. During my time with them, I noticed they often combine different systems without properly integrating them. That creates vulnerabilities? Exactly. If their orbital defenses are made from incompatible technologies, there should be interference patterns we can exploit. Over the next several hours, Maya worked with the fleet's technical teams to analyze the energy signatures from the Garathi defenses. Her xenobiology background proved invaluable in recognizing technology patterns from different species. She identified weapon systems that appeared to be from at least 7 different civilizations, all somehow integrated into a single defensive network. The engineering was impressive but crude, with multiple points where incompatible systems created weaknesses. Here, Maya said, pointing to her analysis on the main display. The Garathi are using energy distribution systems from 3 different species. The quantum frequencies don't match properly, which creates cascade resonance points every 47 seconds. Meaning we have a 47-second window to penetrate their defenses? More than that, if we hit them during the resonance cascade, we can cause feedback that will overload their entire network. Admiral Reyes smiled grimly. Just like you did to their communication system during your escape. The fleet reformed for a coordinated assault, timing their attack to exploit the weakness Maya had identified. When the cascade resonance reached its peak, every human ship fired simultaneously, concentrating their firepower on the critical points in the Garathi defense network. The result was spectacular. Feedback pulses raced through the alien defense systems, causing overloads and explosions across the planet's surface. Within minutes, the orbital defenses were completely neutralized. Ground assault teams, you are cleared for landing, Admiral Reyes announced. Remember, we want those data storage facilities intact. Maya watched as human dropships descended toward the planet's surface, carrying Marines to secure the underground complexes. She knew many of those soldiers would not return, but their sacrifice would provide intelligence that could protect countless other worlds. Doctor, would you like to accompany the recovery teams? Admiral Reyes asked. Your knowledge of Garathi psychology could be valuable in securing their data systems. Maya was tempted to refuse. She had no desire to return to the underground chambers where she had been held prisoner. But she also knew that she might be the only person who could properly interpret what they found in the Garathi databases. Yes, she said. I'll go. The drop to the planet's surface was swift and violent, human ships descending through atmospheric fire from the ongoing bombardment. Maya rode in a command dropship with the assault team leaders, her stomach churning as familiar landscape rushed past the viewports. The landing zone was only a few kilometers from the site where she had been rescued. Maya could see the crater where the original Garathi complex had been, now expanded by additional human bombing runs. But sensors indicated that deeper tunnel systems had survived the attacks. The assault teams moved quickly to secure entrance points to the underground networks. Maya followed them into passages that were eerily similar to the ones where she had been held captive months earlier. The Garathi had not retreated easily. Evidence of fierce fighting was scattered throughout the tunnels, with alien and human blood staining the stone walls. But human superiority in equipment and tactics had eventually won out, and the remaining Garathi had been forced deeper underground. Data storage facility ahead, announced the team leader through their communication system. Dr. Chun, we need you to verify what we're looking at. Maya moved forward to examine the chamber they had found. It was filled with equipment from dozens of different species, all connected in the same crude but effective manner she had observed during her captivity. But what made her blood run cold was what else was in the chamber. Rows of specimen containers, each holding what appeared to be biological samples from different alien species. The Garathi hadn't just been studying civilizations. They had been collecting genetic material. Admiral Reyes, you need to see this, Maya said into her communicator. When the Admiral arrived via a shuttle an hour later, Maya walked her through the full scope of what they had discovered. The Garathi had been conducting a systematic survey of galactic civilizations, gathering not just military intelligence, but biological and technological samples from every species they encountered. They were building a database of everything, Maya explained. Every species in this part of the galaxy, their strengths and weaknesses, their technology and biology. This wasn't just random rating. This was preparation for something much larger. Preparation for what? Maya pointed to star charts displayed on Garathi equipment. Red markers indicated dozens of systems, including many that were home to species humans had never contacted. Conquest. Complete galactic conquest. The Garathi weren't just another aggressive species. They were planning to systematically eliminate or enslave every other intelligent civilization in the galaxy. The full implications took time to sink in. If the Garathi had succeeded in their plans, the entire galactic community would have been at risk. Maya's escape and intelligence had prevented not just attacks on human colonies, but a potential genocide of epic proportions. "Doctor, there's one more thing," said one of the technical specialists who had been examining Garathi data systems. "We found records of their communications with other groups. The Garathi weren't working alone." Maya felt a chill as new data appeared on the displays. The Garathi had been in contact with other aggressive species, sharing intelligence and coordinating attacks. The threat was even larger than anyone had realized. How many other groups? At least 12 that we've identified so far, scattered across multiple sectors, but all following similar patterns of intelligence gathering and systematic attacks. Maya looked around the chamber, filled with evidence of Garathi planning and preparation. Her escape had stopped one part of the threat, but the larger conspiracy was still out there. "We need to warn everyone," she said. "Every species in the galaxy needs to know what we've found here." Admiral Reyes was already issuing orders for the data to be transmitted to Human Command and to the Diplomatic Corps for distribution to allied species. The intelligence gathered from the Garathi facilities would change everything about how civilizations approached galactic security. As the human forces completed their occupation of the Garathi homeworld, Maya stood once again in the chamber where she had been held prisoner. But this time she was there as a free human scientist, helping to catalog the evidence of Garathi crimes. The 3 humans she had seen on the platform were long dead. Their suffering finally ended. But their sacrifice, like hers, had served a purpose. The intelligence gathered here would protect countless other innocents from sharing their fate. Maya picked up one of the alien artifacts from the evidence piles, a device whose purpose she didn't recognize, but whose alien origin was obvious. Somewhere in the galaxy, the species that created this technology was probably still alive, because the Garathi had been stopped before they could complete their plans. It was a sobering reminder of how connected all life in the galaxy really was. The Garathi had understood that connection and tried to exploit it for conquest. But the same interconnectedness that made civilizations vulnerable also made them strong when they worked together. As Maya walked out of the underground chamber for the final time, she carried with her not just the memories of her captivity, but the knowledge that her experience had helped save countless lives across the galaxy. The Garathi had wanted to teach her about submission and hopelessness. Instead, she had taught them about the true strength of intelligent beings who refused to surrender their freedom. It was a lesson that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come.